Well, hi, everybody. My name is Joe Watson. I am the communications coordinator for American Friends Service Committee, Arizona. Hi, everybody. I see you joining. Thanks for being here. American Friends Service Committee, Arizona, is located in Tucson. We are a prison abolition organization following in the long tradition of American Friends Service Committee's prison abolition work over the past several decades. And, um, none of this work, to be honest with you, has been better illustrated than what we've been doing here in Arizona during the coronavirus pandemic. Um, so I kind of want to give you all a little bit of um, a rundown of some of the work that we've been doing over the past several weeks, past couple months here in Arizona. So pretty early on, once this pandemic um, became, uh, you know, ubiquitous, we started calling on our state leaders here in Arizona because we primarily work to support incarcerated folks in the Arizona Department of Corrections and state prisons here in Arizona, and on behalf of their families. What we also try to do is build community here in Arizona across the state, a community of folks um, caring for one another, especially amongst the directly impacted communities around our state. So what we did pretty early on was reach out to our state leaders, the governor's office, our Department of Health Services, who has been charged with leading the effort against the pandemic here in Arizona, and our Department of Corrections, calling on them to obviously immediately protect people inside, making sure that they had um, um, sanitizer, soap, all of the hygiene items necessary to take care of themselves. But then, of course, obviously releasing as many people from state prisons as possible. And early on, actually, the state had identified about 6,600 people incarcerated in our state prisons who were especially vulnerable and at risk to this virus that we immediately advocated for to be released. We joined with a pretty broad coalition of criminal justice reform organizations here in Arizona who all called on our Department of Health Services to ensure that our Department of Corrections was following CDC guidelines and making sure that we were protecting people. That was based on us working with families and other loved ones around Arizona through what we call our Reframing Justice Project. So to give you all a little rundown of what Reframing Justice is about, it's led by our incredible program coordinator, Dr. Grace Gomez. Dr. Gomez conceptualized the Reframing Justice Project quite a few years ago. It's about organizing directly impacted people, those people being formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, their families, their loved ones, people with a conviction history, all of those people to lead this effort toward abolition and making sure that we are taking care of everyone in our community, especially people who find themselves in the punishment system. And so Dr. Gomez, working with folks within our Reframing Justice Project, we'd been gathering evidence of how our Department of Corrections was failing incarcerated people and their families from the very beginning of this crisis. Things like not even providing basic supplies like soap, gloves, sanitizer, making sure that people inside could take care of themselves and protect themselves from the spread of the virus. And so that's what led us to demand of our Arizona Department of Health Services that folks were taken care of, and that we had epidemiologists working with the Department of Corrections to ensure that the department was following CDC guidelines. Our Department of Corrections, as is the case with lots of these agencies across the country, our Department of Corrections here in Arizona has not been exactly transparent about what's been going on inside. And so we've had to depend on our communications with incarcerated people and their families. And like I said, we found that basic supplies were not being provided to incarcerated people. So we started to work with families to create a mutual aid campaign. It was called our Reframing Justice Mutual Aid Campaign. It just ended this morning. We ran it for about a month, and we had just an outpouring of generosity and compassion across the state of people contributing to our mutual aid effort, buying things like bars of soap, toilet paper, gloves, feminine hygiene products, paper towels, all of these things that we actually worked with the Department of Corrections to make sure that they would accept these donations and would distribute them to incarcerated people. We collected, I believe, nearly 900 bars of soap and about 1,900 rolls of toilet paper and close to 6,000 feminine hygiene products to be delivered to incarcerated women here in Arizona. And it was an amazing effort that helps accomplish our goals of building a community across Arizona, one that in which we depend on one another. We belong to each other, and this effort really illustrated how much our work to build community over the past few years through our Reframing Justice project has been successful. Now, we're continuing to try to hold our elected leaders and the people who are running these agencies accountable. Obviously, lots of things need to change. Again, we are a prison abolition organization, but we cannot forget the people who are actually in the system, so we work to protect them, work to care for them and their families. So we do kind of those things simultaneously, work to create a world in which we no longer feel it necessary to have prisons, but while we have them, to make sure that people inside are protected. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of these questions and answer these questions for you. It's really nice to see so many folks from Canada, from the Bronx, it looks like, from Argentina. That's amazing. Kentucky. Thank you all so much for being here. So I actually don't see any questions yet, but feel free to ask us any questions that you would like about our program that we run here in Arizona. Our office, we have 6 folks in our office, just to let you know. Our program director, Caroline Isaacs, she has worked for American Friends Service Committee for quite a long time and has really led and built this program here in Tucson into really the leading criminal justice reform organization in the state. So really what this program has become is really owed to Caroline's leadership. We also have Rebecca Felk, who is a program coordinator here in Arizona. She's our legislative policy coordinator. Tierra Rainey is the project coordinator for what we call the Treatment Industrial Complex. Tierra's work is about reducing the scope of the private prison industry, not just in facilities management, but in how private companies now are working to run treatment facilities, halfway houses, trying to profit off of electronic surveillance, ankle monitoring, things like that. So we work against that through Tierra's leadership. Jason Martinez is our administrative associate here in Arizona. He handles all the logistics, and again, I handle communications for us. So really hardworking team here. All right, looks like we have a couple questions. John, good to see you. How many people have been released in Arizona? So sadly, not many. None actually through our calls for having vulnerable people released from state prisons. Now, there were requests made on behalf of folks who were facing imminent death in our prisons, folks who had weeks to live because of a terminal illness and exacerbated by this crisis. And our governor, Doug Ducey, actually failed to address those requests for compassionate release for several weeks, if not months. I believe he had a lot of these requests sitting on his desk since December, even before the pandemic really broke. But then again, it became all the more urgent once this pandemic started ravaging prisons across the country and now here in Arizona. And so to date, of those 6,600 people who were deemed especially vulnerable to this crisis, the state has actually released none of them and has made no special effort to reduce the population inside our state prisons as a result of the pandemic. So we are continuing to fight for releases every day because, as we all know, there is no such thing as social distancing in jails and prisons. And the only way to accomplish that, anything close to that, is by reducing our prison population. So we've been working with other organizations around the country, organizations like Forward, the ACLU, FAM, to call on the governor and our other state leaders to release people, and we'll continue to do that. Hi, Alice. Is there a way to follow up on those who got the early releases and show benefit to community? So sadly, like I said, nobody who had been deemed vulnerable amongst that population of 6,600 people within our state prison population of 42,000 is actually released. And I will tell you also, very sadly, one of the people who was recommended for compassionate release because of a terminal illness that the governor dragged his feet on, the day after he was released from prison finally, he passed. He died. So he spent really less than a day on the outside after his release from prison before he died. Hi, Lewis. Lewis Webb had a question, wanted me to maybe talk a little more about abolition. So, you know, we envision a world without prisons. You know, I'm formerly incarcerated myself, and when I first joined AFSC Arizona and was first presented with the concept of abolition, it was incredibly difficult for me to come to terms with, for me to imagine. And I actually find that people who are formerly incarcerated and who have spent time incarcerated, they're amongst the folks who find it the most difficult thing to think about because, you know, as people who end up in the system, it's really hard for us to envision this world without prisons. And so, you know, here in Arizona, we believe that we eventually accomplish abolition by building community, by by creating systems of accountability and healing outside of carceral facilities. We believe in helping each other through efforts such as our Reframing Justice Mutual Aid campaign, where we understand that we don't need these systems of punishment or surveillance to care for one another. And so our work here in Arizona is really focused on, besides working within the system to get people out of prison, out of these carceral facilities, and to make sure that people are cared for while they're in those facilities, that we're working on building up our communities so that we hold each other accountable rather than we using these punitive methods such as prison. We believe in a system of accountability and healing for everybody, including people who end up inside. As somebody who's formerly incarcerated, I can tell you anecdotally that I never met somebody on the inside who wasn't themselves. They hadn't been harmed themselves at some point. And so, we're about pursuing healing and accountability for everyone. Dr. Gomez, the founder of our Reframing Justice Project, frequently points out that none of us are all good or all bad. All of us are capable of committing harm, and we don't throw people away. And so we're really focused on building that system of accountability and healing in our communities. Okay. So I'm going to address a question from John again. How do you maintain your spirits while doing such challenging work? I think this is probably a good question for me to end our Facebook live mini presentation here about AFSC Arizona. It's a great question, John. Sometimes, honestly, it's difficult. Here in Arizona and in a lot of other states, Arizona has the fourth highest incarceration rate in the country. We've been taking the wrong approach to achieving justice in our state for a very long time. And it's often work where you don't get a lot of immediately measurable or tangible results as far as victories in pursuing change. But I think for me personally, what makes it possible for me to maintain positive spirits while we do this is seeing this community of people who are participating growing. Lewis, for instance, mentioned hearing the word abolition mentioned a few times in this presentation. Abolition is something that people across our community here in Tucson and across our state are really starting to come around to, starting to envision themselves a world without prisons. We see people out in our community taking action to care for everyone, also adopting our values, AFSC values of recognizing that there is the light within all of us, right? That we do not throw people away, that we belong to each other. And these are values that are very illustrative through our work in the community. We have not ended up with a lot of victories at the State House, our state legislature, but we know that we are having a positive impact there, and that if we continue to stick with this work through those difficult losses, that eventually we will be victorious, and we'll have folks finally rejoin our communities, come home and be with their families and their communities again. So that's really how I personally maintain my positive spirits, and how us in the office, how we do it. It can be challenging sometimes, but then we see our community really coming together. So that's going to be it for today. I really appreciate all of you joining us here on our Facebook live mini presentation from Tucson and American Friends Service Committee, Arizona. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook. We are facebook.com/AFSC Arizona. Also, we have our website, afscarizona.org, and feel free to email any questions about our work, our organization. You can email us at afscaz@afsc.org. So, thanks so much. I hope everybody stays safe and stays positive. Take care.